can stay, up until the full 5 o'clock. That happens. Cyber and threats never sleep or take a nap. So some people have to bolt out to take care of something that's, actively happening. So no worries. If they're not in the room, then we'll just stay here in spirit. So, but first, Julia Armstrong from the Ohio State University, Director, Institute for Cybersecurity and Digital Trust. Round of applause is good for everybody. Yeah, here in spirit, Julia. Charles Askew, Cardinal Health, Information Security and Risk Engineer. There he is. Amy Kane, Grange Insurance Company, AVP of Business Continuity Disaster Recovery. Here in spirit, that's all right. Kyle Conrad from Huntington National Bank, IT Risk Senior Manager. Josh Cox, the City of Westerville Electric Systems Manager. Peter Hill, Huntington National Bank, IT Risk Specialist, Senior. Thank you. Pooja Kotak from Chipotle, Cybersecurity Application Engineer. There she is. Sam Marshall from Olentangy Local School. Did I say that right?
Olentangy.
Olentangy. Everything deserves to be pronounced correctly. So thank you, panel. Preemptively.
When I first moved here.
IT Security Supervisor. That's Sam Marshall, standing right in front of me, wishing I would stop talking.
Or like I always say Bell Fountain, and it's Bell Fontaine.
Nick Martin, the Wendy's Company IT Auditor. Michael McSweeney from Vargo, Senior Director of Software and IT. Is that you over there, Michael? No? Okay, here in spirit. Jason Montgomery, who we were able to enjoy from our keynote earlier. Thank you, Jason, once again. Friends from ReynCon. All right. Bryn Runyon from Nationwide Network Security Engineer. Michelle Williams from Boundless, Director of Cybersecurity. All right, and this brings me to this very esteemed panel. Again, thank you to Connie Big applause for Connie Matthews once again. She always helps support cybersecurity in Columbus and our events so much every year. So we're going to start with this panel, this very talented panel that she's lined up. So right there in the middle, we have Trey Smith from OSU Wexner Medical Center, our CISO. We have Jana Moore from Belron International, CISO. Oh. She's on the left side.
I forgot to have him change it.
Kevin Wohlever from the state of Ohio, Deputy CISO for the state of Ohio. Julie Zwayer from Bread Financial, Vice President, Technology and Cybersecurity Government, Risk and Controls. And of course, last but not least, our moderator for today's session, Connie Matthews, ReynCon Educational Services and ReynCon Educational Services and Training founder and CEO. All right, and Connie, I'm going to hand the floor to you as you take us through navigating the modern threat landscape, critical security priorities for information security leaders in 2025 and going into 2026.
And of course, we'll be talking about AI, shocker, right? All right, so Jana, I'm going to start with you. So obviously, we talk about all the time resource allocation under constraints. So given the reality of budget constraints and talent shortages, how do you prioritize among the 10 critical areas that we'll be talking about today? What framework do you use to determine where to invest when you have limited resources?
Yep, so that's a really big question, and there's probably 50 answers to it. So just a quick update. So I actually just started a new role at MoneyGram. So Belron was a wonderful run, and a true gift, but now I'm over at MoneyGram as the CISO. But when you're talking about resources, it's all about context for me. And so depending on where you're working, what your business priorities are, what your regulatory requirements are, you know, what are those gaps that you're trying to close or due to audits, et cetera. It's really about context around what are the critical priorities that you need to get bubbled up to the top so that you can focus your people on the right things. Because there's so many times that your team is so busy and there's so many things that need to be done, and everyone is, you know, no one has enough time. You never have the budget that you need. But it's about kind of step back, let's look at the priorities, and let's make sure we're putting our time in the right places. So I think it's always going to be an issue. I mean, it's always been an issue, every role that I've had. And so it's really about setting expectations then with the business to say, look, I'm with you on this journey. These are the things that we're going to focus on together. And then these are the things we're going to push out to Q2, Q3, Q4, and start setting that expectation and then reiterate it often. You need to be talking about it a lot. Because if you just kind of put out a roadmap and you expect everybody to remember what your roadmap is, you're gonna start to create a disconnect between yourself and the people that you're serving at your organization. So I think it's set the expectation, get it on paper, and then reiterate it and make sure everyone's on the same page. That's what's worked for me, and that way your team can get behind it. They see the vision that you're working on, they see the priorities, and everybody's moving in the same direction instead of 10 different directions and then really not getting the right things done. That's kind of how I approach it.
Trey, do you want to add something to that?
Oh, it's on. I'll echo everything that Jana said, but I'd also add just your partnerships within IT and being clear about who's going to take it that last mile. Sometimes it's assumed security because we discover it. We're also supposed to solve it and fix the problem, and that's not necessarily the case. So when you have limited resources, they have to be able to find, again, who are they passing that baton off to, and have a relationship with that individual that the priorities line up. Because oftentimes we have a high priority for that particular thing that needs to be resolved. The individual receiving the baton doesn't have the same priority. So if you can pave the way for them to represent you better as they go out into IT and other parts of the business where they hold the responsibility of adjusting the control, then you can hopefully multiply their efforts a little bit.
Perfect. So I'll ask each of you the next question because it's the big two-letter word, AI, right? Julie, I'll start with you. So AI appears both as a security risk, of course my phone just went, and a tool that attackers are using. How are you balancing the investment in securing your own AI systems versus you using AI to enhance your defensive capabilities? And with AI, is there anything that keeps you up at night? I know those are loaded questions, but.
Yeah, AI is very exciting, I have to say. I'm not afraid of it, and I hope all of you feel the same. One of the things is just like educating ourselves, learning. You know, at Bread Financial, we've embraced AI very responsibly. I would say we're very cautious about it and making sure that we're doing it in the right way. Security is always key to the start of all of it. And as much as you want to go fast, you also have to make sure that, you know, those controls are really in place. You have a good AI framework. You have good policies and standards in place. And, you know, using your industry standard requirements is key to that, as well as making sure your business needs are met as well. So I think just being responsible with it and making sure and not being afraid of it is really key, because it is coming at us and we need to embrace it.
Kevin, I'll have you go next.
Well, thank you. I'm kind of surprised by that. I look at AI from a very defensive standpoint on how to approach things. I know it's going to be used. We can have all the policies and guardrails and everything else in place, but I need to understand, from my perspective, how it's being used, what the metrics are. And I kind of look at it as like quantum computing in some ways. You're not going to be able to directly measure the impact of AI on your organization, but you're going to be able to get information secondhand as an inference activity. So are you getting the results that you expect? Are you improving performance somewhere? Are you getting the metric improvements that you would like to see? But on the defensive side, I'm trying to find out what those metrics are, and I'm trying to understand where I can see where the problems are coming from, because I know they're going to be there. So it comes back to almost what we were talking about in the first question, which is you have to have your people, you have to trust your people and get the information that's there. And it's going to be a communications activity. You have to have communications across the board to be able to understand what's going on with it and then make sure it's being used properly.
Trey.
You mind if I add? Okay. So my challenge with AI, and I think a lot of ours, I challenged a member of my team to put together a matrix of, like, what does AI mean and what use case are we talking about? You can go out there in the vendor floor and ask, and they all say they have something for AI. But what are you talking about? Is it, generative AI and preventing people from putting PHI and other information into it? Is it agentic AI to agentic AI and some sort of conversation between the two that you want to protect against? Or is it all the way at the chip level when we're talking about supercomputers and what they're doing? It's too broad of a term. And if we're struggling with that, when the business has someone approach them and say, we have AI, they're excited, but what does that really mean? So if you have a policy around AI, it's too broad. So I was working with a couple of vendors and I asked the same question, like, how are you articulating to your potential customers exactly what it is you're selling and exactly what it is you're protecting against? They don't have that taxonomy together yet either. So I would encourage you, as you work with peers in this room and others, come up with a better description for what you're talking about. So if it's strictly someone wanting to write emails faster, that's one conversation. If you got people developing bots in-house, that's a different conversation. But they've got to be terms that make sense when they cascade from one group to the other. Or you're going to be protecting against something that's not even in scope, or vice versa. You're not protecting against something that you missed. And one last thing I'll add to that is, as we use AI from a defense perspective, again, what are you selling me? Like, what kind of tool is that? Whether it's in Proofpoint, CrowdStrike, any of our tools, that's great, but how is it helping me? Why, if it's a impersonation of Jana and her skill set, that's great, but she's watching, say, third-party risk management, that's all she's watching. She's not watching other aspects. So I still have gaps in my portfolio, even though my tool is telling me that they're the gold standard of all things AI.
So you're saying there's not a silver bullet?
No. But no, I think it's where it just took off so fast that everyone just took that brand, you put a little asterisk next to it, it's AI-ish, right? Because something about it is AI. It's not new, but everyone's kind of wrapping their marketing strategies around it.
Yeah. Jana, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I think for me, I agree, there's so many different facets to it. There's a lot of education that has to happen with your users to say, hey, it's like, we want you to go test out all of these new technologies for productivity's sake, for opening up and unlocking new avenues for business development and growth. Like, there's all of these things that we could be using it for. And I now work at an organization that's very forward-looking on this and leaning into leveraging tool sets in this way. And so we're very aggressively pursuing how we can adopt AI within our day-to-day lives. So we're racing behind it. From a CISO perspective, we're just running behind it, trying to throw some, policy, education, guardrails, and all of those things, but it's already out of the barn, right? So how do you put those guardrails around the horses that are already out running? But we're doing our best, and everybody's in the same boat. So when I talk to some of my peers and they're like, hey, what are you doing with AI? I'm like, nothing. What are you doing? So we're all trying to grasp what it is that we must do to protect the data, protect access to that data. The same things, you got to go back to the basics really at the end of the day, and it's a lot of education with your organization so that they know what you can't do and all those things. On the other side of it, from a threat perspective, that's where I lose my sleep. Honestly, it's the speed, it is just the sheer volume, the noise, all of those things that are happening so quickly now, where we used to have a little bit of a buffer to like regroup and kind of get a game plan, that's gone. And so it's really just a reactionary place that we find ourselves in sometimes. And so it's how do you make sure that you have the right kind of processes in place to be able to react as quickly as possible, and also get your company on the same page with, it's not a matter of if, but when, and then how resilient are we as an organization to come back.
If I can add one more thing, being in healthcare, when the HIPAA security rule was first rolled out and enforced, there was this chase for HIPAA compliance, of which there is no such thing. You've got processes that you put in place and you operationalize around managing risk. AI is very similar. So we may end up in a situation where that first government sanction or some sort of sanction starts to define really how we protect ourselves against, AI.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the people that work more in the government, so the gentlemen. So we are always constantly hearing about double extortion. I've heard up to quadruple extortion, which is insane to me. How has all of that impacted your business and really more importantly, your incident response planning? Because obviously with ransomware or something like that, you can't really plan for it in the sense like you don't know when or if it's going to hit. So it's not like a typical like, oh, we're seeing something, like a network is down. I mean, so it's not always as obvious, and obviously a lot of organizations can take a little bit of time to understand that. So just talk a little bit, and Kevin, I'll let you go first, on what that looks like and how it's impacted your incident response plans.
What it looks like is trying to get people to understand that it's going to happen to the state at some point. And agencies around the state are independent entities in many ways, and they don't like to hear that what they're doing may not be proper. For me, there's so many ways to approach it, but it comes down to the basic foundational activities that you have to do. You have to have multiple ways to recover. You have to understand what's being really impacted. So it's a data governance activity. Know what data is involved, what type of data. Is it going to be an impact to the reputation of the state? And then we get back to, okay, how many different backups do we have? What's our DR sites look like? What's our inventory of systems involved? And how long can we afford to be down with all of these things? So it's going to be, our IR plans have become just making sure we have good plans in place that cover all of these bases. We've extended them, and we're doing much more tabletop exercises so people are ready to go when it does happen. So.
And I was just going to add something. So this was many years ago. I worked with a small credit union, and their president actually took up all their backup tapes to their home safe every night. Isn't that sad that might have been not be a bad plan, but it's probably not a good plan. But I'm just saying, like, who would have thought that could potentially be a plan?
Immutable backups.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, can we go and see what they're laughing at?
I know, no kidding.
Sounds better than this situation. But I'll just add that the extortion aspect of our incident response plan, it keeps the incident alive longer, but we don't have a great way of honestly tracking that. Yeah. We go from detecting it, containing it, recovering, giving the green light that we're back up and operating, but we are aware that our data is out there somewhere. So how do we continue to manage where we we discover it, try to eradicate it if possible, but people move on to the next challenge, because we started with we don't have the staff to necessarily deal with the things that are proactively in front of our face, versus going out and following up on an incident that's now no longer business disruptive. So there's a gap there for us at the moment.
Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
what are you gonna ask?
I'm sorry. I know those laughing distracted me too. About how are you changing the way you do tabletops around double and quadruple extortion and that type of activity?
Yeah, tabletops are so important, but what I will tell you in learning from them myself over the last year and doing them with the teams is that, making sure your board is along for it. I mean, our board sat on our tabletop. It was an amazing experience. It was good for them to understand as well. Not only that, but making sure your third parties are with you during those things. Third parties are where I'm up at night a lot, to be honest. Making sure that, they're included in the DR plans as well, like making sure that that's considered. But having a very transparent, a lot of communication with your third parties is really essential, especially during those tabletop exercises.
Jana, do you want to add anything? Okay. All right, so the next question is, I know this especially in banking, probably at this state, there's probably a lot of legacy systems. So obviously, many organizations are stuck with legacy systems that can't easily be replaced due to time, money, all kinds of things. What creative approaches have you found for managing security around these persistent vulnerabilities while also waiting on modernization for budgets and allocation? Jana, do you want to take that one?
I mean, this is always an issue, isn't it? I mean, there's just always the old stuff, mainframes. I mean, there's just like, they're always hanging around. So really, I think for me, it's a matter of, understanding where we have exposures. Do we have the right monitoring in place? Are we controlling the access and how it's communicating? Do we have any segmentation we can put in? Again, it goes back to kind of the basics of what we're here to do from a security standpoint. And so it's about managing risk. So if whatever those legacy assets are, making sure that there's a plan to get them out or what that looks like. But what sort of data's on there? Is it high-risk data? Really starting to look at it, again, going back to context. That's the important part of this, is that you shouldn't really be treating all of it the same, because that's going to be expensive. You're going to have a lot of distraction from that. So it's just a prioritization and then making sure that we're driving it out and then reporting on it and having that governance around it so that you can quantify as the risk goes down. So to me, it's kind of just, those are the hard yards, in my opinion, is doing the basics really, really well. And legacy or old operating systems, whatever it is, that's a lot of that for me.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the biggest things in any legacy systems, and we've all dealt with this for many years, I'm sure, in different companies, is understanding, first of all, like, where are your crown jewels? Like, understanding your critical applications and infrastructure, making sure you have DAR on all of those things, making sure you have baseline controls on all of it, and if you don't, make a plan to do so. Just because it's a legacy system doesn't negate it from having controls in place. Even if it's manual, you need to make sure that those things are there, and then making sure, again, like you talked about with metrics and reporting, to ensure that those things are always secure at all times is really essential.
And Trey, it's just because, like, I know, like, Ohio State in some ways is like a mini city. So you also deal with a lot of, especially in critical infrastructure like gas, electric, and water. Unfortunately, if some of that stuff goes down, I mean, I've seen clients literally order stuff off of eBay from China that has a backdoor in it, and if you try to fix it, you can't use it, makes the devices no longer in use. So when you're looking at that kind of thing, what is like some thought processes, and how do you manage that? Or does that keep you up at night?
Not up at night as much. So the medical center side, we don't have quite as much of the small city aspect to it, but we are a part of that ecosystem. So I'm aware of it, and we do have some areas downstream that we're responsible for. And it's a challenge. It really is. We're expanding our framework to take into account more of the building automation and other critical pieces of infrastructure so that we can have more resiliency in that space, but it's a work in progress. That's the best way to put it. And if we're going back to legacy systems, it's like, cockroaches and Windows XP. Like, they just survive everything. And you got to, really, it's storytelling. You got to figure out a way to tell the story, and it's not about compliance. With everything that's happening now, the reality is you're never going to bring that system back, right? If the hardware dies, if the person who set it up is moved on to 15 different jobs, you're never getting that thing back. So you got to get it to a place of what's your business continuity strategy or your disaster recovery strategy around this, not the fact that it's just a old legacy system. And it also plays into we have a lot more medical device challenges. So that's one of the spaces where we struggle with something we can't patch or have to use segmentation as our control until we can get to a place where we can do some patching.
So Trey, I'll pick on you. Oh, go. Did you have anything else to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, Ohio, I put a quote in here earlier that says, we have to deal with using 2010 security techniques to support 2000 technology with 2030 tech requirements. And then and support a user base that's 1990 to 2050, you know, and because of that, we don't have a lot of our support people. All of these folks have retired already. We have legacy systems in place, and the only way to get through all of that, from my book, you almost have to have this whole, like a shotgun wedding. It's going to be done now, and just do it. You can't let it drag on.
Yeah, it's almost like hiring mainframe developers and how much they cost per hour because the younger generation doesn't have that experience. And the same thing, you know, when you look at like gas and electric, if you lose all your line people, who are you going to find to replace those folks? Because I've seen companies where if they fall for a phishing attack more than 3 times, they're fired. And I'm like, what are you going to do when you fire every one of your line people? Like, I mean, I guess electric doesn't matter in 2025, but it's just those things where for some of us, you know, because I'm old, I mean, when I first got into technology, it was like NT4 Windows 2000, and I think about how many people didn't have home computers, how many people didn't have computers in the office. So we're kind of the last generation that is kind of, you know, scoped from no technology to technology, and it's just such a different world. And that old technology we rely so heavily on all over the place that we just don't have the staff or the people that can do that anymore, which is kind of scary in a lot of ways. So we talk about insider threat all the time, and I know a pet peeve of mine is I think sometimes when we say insider threat, they're always saying that it's your internal employees doing something like intentionally wrong, which I feel like that's not necessarily the case. And so I think people misuse that word a lot. So what suggestions do you have? Like, how do we get over of saying that the end user is the stupid person or they don't know what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. Like, so how do you guys address that? And I'll have you go first, Trey. How do you address that to make that the end users feel comfortable? Like, if they see something wrong, if they come to your teams, are you going to make them feel stupid, or are you going to embrace it? Because they're going to notice an anomaly way faster than we are because they're in those systems every day. So how do you kind of work through that?
That's a good call out. Last year, we started to shift our metrics for our phishing campaigns to reporting is our most critical metric, not who's falling for it. Like, we don't want to shame people away from clicking. We want them to click the report button. So, and we did this thing called, we had it was a phishing challenge, sort of like a actual bass fishing tournament. So the winner got like a trophy with the bass, all that good stuff. Try to make it fun.
Hilarious.
Like, that doesn't really work, but it allowed for us to at least find a group that we could kind of showcase and say that they were the ones that reported more. And reporting helps, because if we can get that initial report, we have a chance to remove it from our systems and save ourselves from downstream impact. The other side of that coin, though, you mentioned insider threats, and like Jana mentioned earlier, with AI, the types of attacks, like spear phishing is just going to be, phishing will be spear phishing. It won't be the random hope people fall for this. It will, you know, I saw Connie, she's on vacation, and, you know, she's just came back, and I'm going to send her something very targeted towards her. That's easy to generate now. And if you fall for it, like, who wouldn't? So penalizing people for that is not, I think, the approach that we need to continue to take. We need to assume it's zero trust, which to me is, you know, pie in the sky, but at the same time, we have to be honest. We may have to turn people's accounts off more frequently. We may have to require some more risk-based authentication when people do a step-up sort of activity, just whether they don't like it, but if we want to put technology in place to stop it, that's what we need to do. But then we also have to trust the user to be aware that if, you know, what is that, like the MFA compromises, if you get a weird, you know, dual push at 3 a.m. and you didn't do it, don't approve it, right? That's why it's there. Don't approve that. Don't want you to feel stupid about it, but you didn't ask for it. You shouldn't approve it.
Has anyone paid the tolls text message? I got one today. No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say my team runs the cyber training and awareness for Bread Financial, and One of the things that we do is we gamify it. So actually next week we're having our cybersecurity week, which is a lot of fun. And similar things, we're trying to encourage reporting. So our metrics is very, very focused on how many people have reported. And I do think, you know, it is important to make sure that people have awareness. They do get training if they fail a phishing test, for sure. And it doesn't matter if, you know, what level you are, you get the training if you fail the phishing campaign. So I think it's really important to do that. Also, I do have metrics separate from contractors and employees because I need to understand the risk a little bit differently. So putting those additional metrics in too gives a better understanding of like where do you need to focus the training more. And then the third thing would be around people that have high level access. Those campaigns, we do target those folks to see, and then we give them more training often just to make sure, because those are the folks that would be impacted the most.
And maybe this is something at the end when we're asking questions, someone can weigh in. But you just mentioned training, and we do the same thing. Like, what are we training against now? Like the bad URL, the bad, you know, English, that's not a thing anymore. So what are you training them to look for? And if you're doing, well, if we're up against more sophisticated attackers, they're using M365 approved domains to get past, you know, your email blocking because it's coming from somewhere you trust. It's extremely difficult to identify the phishing email. So I'm just curious what people are thinking are opportunities to better train our staff. And more, my opinion is just if it's not a sense of urgency, report it. You know, it doesn't hurt to report it and wait a little while to respond to it. But that's just habitual more than it is, here are the indicators that this may be a, you know, compromised email. So I'm just curious if anyone out there has done something different as far as training, or if anyone up here, and maybe not now, but at the end.
Yeah.
From an insider threat perspective, when we talk about our users and like them being the weakest link, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. I hate when people say that. It's our first line of defense. I mean, honestly, we have to empower those people to understand their role in the organization. And so when, like, for instance, me starting this new job, I'm spending a lot of time meeting people and getting in front of groups of people, and I'm talking to them about that, saying, look, you're just an extension of my team, so welcome to the group, and you're now going to be my early indicators, because that's really what they are. They're just part of your little network, you know? What was those little honeypots? I could just call them little honeypots out there. But some of the things that we did, Trey, to your question, at my last organization, we would use actual real-world examples of the new kind of advanced emails coming in, and then we would just defang them and send them out and use it as education that way, so they can say, see, this is what we're up against now versus the older ways that we were doing it.
To your point, my view is at the state, I don't have 50,000 vulnerable people. I have 50,000 firewalls. And we have to train them to be properly aware and move it forward. So there are human firewalls on these activities. I think with all the things that are happening, I'm not sure there's a benefit anymore to running a phishing campaign very often. And if it does, the reporting is a good idea, but at the same time, let's just do a micro training right then and there, be done with it, and move things forward. And then finally, we have to use AI to help us on this and be able to help find these and get them off of our environment faster. So.
And I don't know if you guys have comments, but one of the things I think about all the time is, obviously, everyone's in business to make money. So if we scare our end users to not be afraid to do anything, that's one major problem. But if you think about, like, I've been on calls, we have a security awareness group that we normally have about 50 different companies that kind of join. And what we've been talking a lot is, when you think about some of the new attack vectors, like when you're on Zoom, how many times have you been on camera and your network is unstable? So what happens, either your lips don't match what you're talking. So if we tell people that's an indicator, it may or it may not be. And so I always think that we just have to educate people how to use the technology, not make them afraid of using the technology, because if we do that, we're going to struggle to get budget, honestly, because if no CEO of any company is going to say, our productivity just dropped 70% because all of our end users are afraid to use technology. So any thoughts on that?
I agree. I think we need to do a continuous training and awareness campaigns on these things. It's just make people aware. I mean, there's still card skimmers on gas pumps, right? And so make people aware about how to look for these things. We're not going to catch them all, but if we get people just to think about it, I like having people report more than anything else. And when people walk over to the security team and say, hey, this doesn't look right, that's a win as far as I'm concerned.
So that kind of brings us to the next question when we talk about ROI and how do we sell upwards to whoever we report to, whether that's the CFO, CEO, CIO, CTO. How do we get the money that we need by really putting the business in a better situation, knowing we can't block everything? But obviously, if you can manage 80% of your risk lowered and you only have to manage 20% risk, or whatever that number is, makes it easier. So can you share with the group, and we'll start with you, Julie, what you've seen work when you have those discussions with executive leadership?
Data is everything. So, and Jana knows this as well. Like, I think it's always really important to lean on your third-party teams to help you. Like, okay, what's our business case? They can help you, and they do a great job of it, better than I do. So oftentimes it's helpful to get that information ahead of time so that you're armed with, okay, here's the rationale and reason why we need this and the benefits it will take, over the next 1 to 3 years, for example. So it's really important to have all those facts in play so that you go in, armed with, oh, I just want another tool. No, you want it for a reason, and here's what we're going to do about it.
And I'll let everyone answer that. So go ahead.
Okay.
We'll just go down the row.
All right. Honestly, in my opinion, you got to learn the business's language. Mm-hmm. We spend a lot of time in groups like this, and we learn to speak cybersecurity, but we don't learn to speak the language of the business for which we work. Because if we know what they're trying to do in the language that they're trying to do it, like we're trying to get market share. Like from Ohio State Medical Center, we're competing with Ohio Health and Trinity and Mount Carmel. I don't totally understand that. But I do know, they can get patients in at a certain speed. We have to get patients in at a faster speed. Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking about a security tool, I need to be speaking about it that way. This enables us to register patients faster. It enables us to bill faster and better, have a resilient financial system that can send bills out on time, do collections on time. That language resonates. So then the investment they're making becomes a part of the investment portfolio that's impacting the bottom line and not just a part of the cost center, which most IT and security is viewed as.
So I have a quick funny story. So I was on this panel with a CISO from a hospital, and his comment to me was that he didn't understand why the business could not talk security language and understand. And I said, you work at a hospital, right? Some of you have heard this story. I go, you work at a hospital, right? I go, so does that mean tomorrow you can do brain surgery or open heart surgery? And he's like, point well taken. And I think that really reinforces that conversation, because it's kind of like, if you work in a hospital, you're not capable. I mean, are you capable? Yes, to do brain surgery, but would I want you to do brain surgery on me? Probably not, because you've never done it. Well, maybe it'll make me smarter. I don't know. But I mean, it's just that's a perfect example of how sometimes we get in our own way when we make these assumptions but in every business, everybody has a role and a place, and we bring strong teams together to make a cohesive team.
Yeah, and honestly, to your point about the other CISO, if you come in the room having a conversation about the business, at least people start to relate to you. The first thing you come in and say is, let me talk to you about security. It's like, no, hey, I heard that we are trying to move into a different market. That's awesome. Let me tell you about some challenges that may result if we go down that path without a security control in place. Totally different conversation. You may or may not get more engagement, but you probably lose them immediately if you say, we got so many vulnerabilities, we can't patch them on time. I want to buy a new thing that's going to just cost us $1 million. It's not going to get you very far.
Jana?
I mean, I agree with everything that's being said. I would add that an example would be like going for ISO or SOC 2, things like that. Those things can be expensive to get into the organization depending on where you are. And so for a quick example recently was, what's the business outcome? What's this going to create for us from a competitive advantage? What are our, what's our competition doing? Do they have like a trust services center that they're advertising that they're, they have these accreditations and that we're now behind, lagging behind now, so it's kind of what's the business outcome and how is this going to create some competitive advantage? Also, depending if you're highly regulated or not, there's a lot of things that have to happen within your organization that up to recently was very manual in a lot of cases. But now with the onset of AI and other things that can be automated, that could be another business outcome of releasing some of your resource constraints through getting some technology in to help you do things better, faster, smarter, and then allowing regulators, better access into your environment to attest to some of these things. So I think it's really tying it to what's the outcome, what's the business outcome. So I agree with what you were just saying, Trey.
You guys took all the good stuff.
That's why I try to rotate you so that you aren't the last person every time.
In some ways, you have to approach it, well, I approach it like I did when I was trying to sell them on disaster recovery. And what's the impact to the business if you're down, and for how long can you afford to be down? Yeah. So how much is the investment for you? So then when you start to get them thinking like that, and then you turn around and throw some of the scary slides out there. Hey, we stopped 48 million improper connections last month. That's good for us, but they only have to be successful once, right? So we need defense in depth. We need to be able to have other processes in place. That's what I keep trying to use and push forward. So.
And the other thing I would challenge, like, I've been in meetings with so many people where other organizations that they're bringing in have asked the IT people, what are the most critical systems? I've never, ever once not been able to ask the CEO of a company, how much money would you lose for every 60 seconds you're down? And they don't even have to think about it. And they also know what critical systems. And so that, I think that's a great opportunity for us as security people to have those conversations with them. I mean, obviously, like at a Cardinal or a Nationwide that are huge companies, you may not have that access. But it's one of those where if we don't ask the question, we're losing. And I mean, we always joke about there's no better time to take advantage of after a breach because normally you can get all kinds of money. I really wish that wasn't the case. But I don't think there's any CEO in any company that has not heard of ransomware. And I have seen a huge jump of tabletops because of that. Like, there were so many organizations just didn't do them at all for years. And so, like, we also have to leverage, like, if you're not paying attention to the news, if you don't have, you're not signing up to get breach reports. I have, like, I can send it if anybody wants it. I just don't know off the top of my head. But every time that a breach is reported, I get an email, and it tells me exactly what the breach was, how it happened, and all their, it's all, to the SEC things. So it's, most of them are publicly traded companies, but some of them are not. Like, educate yourself, because as a CEO or CFO, they want facts. They don't want you to tell them how you feel. They want to know, like, what is the risk to that? So any comments on any of that, I think?
Yeah, I was going to throw a little bit of a challenge to just the way we use language. CEOs and other parts of the business care about critical functions, not necessarily critical systems.
Right.
There are systems that support those functions that we need to talk about, but your business-facing conversation should likely be in terms of those functions. Exactly. So if your tellers, your credit approvers, your collection people, the functions they perform are critical, right, to the business. Then the systems that support those, that's an IT-based conversation. And IT proved to me that you have resilient systems that support those functions. Because what I've learned is when there's an outage and there's a command center, they don't know what you're talking about when you name a server.
Yeah.
They may not even know what you're talking about when you name an application, because internally they call it something different.
Right.
So you have to be able to tell them the red tablecloth is down. That's what they want to hear, even if it's based on, M365. That means nothing to them.
Right.
Is the red tablecloth working or not?
Yeah, can we
So,
can't do
and can
business
we do
functions,
business?
yeah.
So I challenge security leaders to figure out what the business calls certain functions, pivot over to IT and figure out what systems support those functions, and then learn to have those conversations sort of, bilingually.
All right, so I think we have about 15 minutes, so we can do more questions if no one has any questions in the audience. So if you have something, if you can stand up, we'll bring a mic so everybody can hear. I think we have someone over here. No. We're sitting down, so you can sit down, it's fine.
So this was a question or response to Trey's question about how companies are handling the phishing aspect, training aspect. I think one of the challenges we see is the training seems to be every year consistent. It's the same, look for these 3 things. My suggestion, or some of the things I think we're doing to help in our space, is having a good threat intelligence program to be able to understand what's emerging, what's changing, what's out there, so that you can inform your business about, hey, here's a new technique. I'll tell you one example that we saw this week that I've never seen before is threat actors are leveraging, we've all seen QR codes that lead to a credit harvesting, but they're now putting them in an ICS, which is a calendar invite. So that's something new. You talk about your users looking for phishing emails, and some of the things they're looking at. Well, that's not something they're going to think to look at because it's a calendar invite, and depending how they may spoof the email address, it may look legitimate. So a lot of that comes, at least from my perspective and from what we're trying to do, is having a good threat intelligence program to be able to understand those emerging threats, how they're leveraging. Social engineering is evolving daily. I mean, they're coming up with all different type of techniques. So being able to research that, understand that, and then even go as far as, well, what controls do we have in place? Do we have controls for QR codes? That's one thing. You go a level deeper to understand, how do we protect against QR codes in our environment? So now you're trying to only look for controls, but you're also trying to help protect the end user. And then, actually, I was just reading the email. We sent out an email about 5 minutes ago educating users about this new technique. So being able to inform them. But I think, again, back to your question about how do you maybe help educate, I think, again, I work in threat intelligence, by the way, but having a good threat intel program, I think, helps to keep not ahead of, but try and stay in line with what threat actors are always trying to come up with, just different techniques. So just my 2 cents.
I think that's a great call out. Just one question. Did the email about that new technique come out from the security team, or did it come out from corporate communication?
Security awareness. So we partner a lot with our security awareness team to say, hey, here's an emerging threat. Here's what they're doing. Here's how they're doing it. And it's very detailed. When you read this email, it's very detailed that tells the end user, here's exactly how they're doing it. So we try and provide as much detail as possible to say, here's what to look out for. Here's how it's coming in. You may not be able to give different headers and things like that, but at least you can give a good general description of how it's coming in, so they know what to look out for. Because again, people tend to say, okay, if I look for these signs, I know what to look out for, and that's what you're trying to do, is get in the psyche of people to know what they typically are going to look for, and that's what you're trying to ultimately get them to help. So we know our people are our defenses, and if we can be in front of that and tell them exactly what to look for, and communicate with our different teams, I think it helps to protect the company. So just something to add there.
First of all, thank you very much for touching on these very important points as far as cybersecurity is concerned, and then how businesses, we can best understand the business functions that we have within our organizations. I think, Julie, you had talked about the importance of managing third-party risk. I am in the GRC function at my organization. Vertiv is the company I work for. But I just want to find out, I don't think you touched on maybe you did and I might have missed it, but what about the threats posed by the third parties of our third parties? So do you have any
yes.
programs in place to efficiently manage the threat that are posed by those?
Absolutely.
Those
My
vendors?
nagging to my team constantly about fourth parties. So I think one of the questions I'm always, my team also manages the third-party assessments as well and the vendor and brand partner engagements. So one thing that we're always making sure of is that, asking the deep questions, when we, even our teams, for example, making them feel empowered to ask these questions. Oh, do you have an AI component? Okay, where does that data go? Is it going to a fourth party? LinkedIn was one recently. I think it was last year, actually, not so recent. But I didn't even know they turned on a component that then would share that data with other companies. And that was more on the recruiting side of things. So if you had recruiters using that component within LinkedIn, potentially you had that data sharing going on. And so when were they going to tell us that? When I was at the other company, you have to constantly be asking these questions, and just having the third-party assessment and those questionnaires has to evolve every year. You got to look at, what are you asking them? Do we need to refine this? Can we get automation in place for some of these things? Because a lot of the data is available out there for the third parties that you can get comfort with, like DR, for example. But some of them don't have all of that. You can have a SOC 2 from them or a SIG, for example, but is that enough? No, it's not. So always making sure that you're understanding your third parties, and then asking them a question, where is the data going? If they use a fourth party, for example, I want to know that, and I want to understand where, how's that data being secured? So hopefully that answered your question.
I'll jump in on that. Besides the third party, I look at several things. We do have to evaluate the third party. I'm concerned about how they do their code development and some other things on that. So with the code repositories and stuff like that, and some of the poisoning that's taken place on those code repositories, that's another area that we have to worry about. On the federal side, they're looking at the software bill of materials, and it has to be required for and provided. We are pushing for anybody that's already FedRAMP compliant or going to be, to help provide that information, because we have to know this information all the way. So.
Yeah, that was something I was going to mention that we didn't talk about, which was the supply chain vulnerabilities. And again, for us to have that conversation with the business, we're not talking about supply chain and ordering widgets and gadgets. It's what's being used in that software that we are now partnering with this business to perform our business. And that's, you can capture some of that in the assessments, but to communicate the risk of it, it's challenging.
Any other questions?
Back to the third party. I'm just curious from the panel, out of the assessments that you guys are doing, is anyone using a specific tool, or are you just using like Excel the old way, or?
Since I have a mic, we developed one in-house. We used to use Coral, C-O-R-L. They have I think they're one of the top vendors out there, but we ended up developing one where the research arm of Ohio State uses a platform called RedCap. It's a survey tool typically used to survey study subjects. So we wrote our questionnaire on that platform.
Can I ask, what kind of assessments are you asking about, though?
Third-party risk assessments.
Third-party risk assessments. So yes, we did put our own assessment together. We run it, we're just installing a tool called OneTrust to be able to run assessments out to them. And then we use another vendor scorecard, like the credit scoring and stuff like that. So we use BitSite, and we feed both of these together on the state and start looking at it. And then we also do a risk analysis on how that vendor's being used in the environment of the state. And based on that risk analysis, it says how often we will do a re-review of that vendor.
One other tool that we haven't talked about up here is called Prevalent, and they also offer services along with their SaaS platform, so you can have them help you do the follow-ups for remediation purposes with those third parties, which is nice to have. And then they also do breach notification of your critical vendors that if you pay for that module. So there's some interesting software out there and services that could really help accelerate that program.
Yeah, we use BitSite as well, and we have our own questionnaire in addition to that, as well as Coupa, which is a tool that we also leverage. I know EY has a really great, robust tool, and I'm trying to get my hands on it, to be honest. I'm like, put that in the budget. But they do a lot of automation, which I'm very interested in learning about, and I'm just starting to explore it myself, so something to consider.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we can let you all leave.
Two quick answers and a quick question. We built out our own program also. We recently moved over to CoverBase. Excellent product for third-party risk management. We've seen 60% increase in the assessments, reduction. If you haven't looked at it, we did a lot of looking. It's an excellent tool. Trey, we have a weekly CSOC report that goes out. It's almost like a podcast for all of the threats, and it's attended by the majority of the company, and it's real time. Obviously, we see a lot of threats come in because of what we do for our business, and we show those. We walk through how they came through. We walk through how we worked with our members to resolve them, but we give them that update, and that we still do the phishing and all that, but we found that weekly broadcast has probably been more impactful as far as an awareness. It's virtual. They dial in, disable cameras, microphones, you got chat, but it has been extremely successful in getting people to understand what the current ones that are coming in today. The entire organization is available. Now my quick question. So Identity Governance Administration table stakes. Identity security is the new frontier. I'm interested in wondering, when you think about coupled with AI, the non-human identities, NHIs, what are you all doing to address the NHIs, and how are you taking advantage of any tools that you know of right now to get those types of things under control? They're bane of everybody's existence right now.
Right now, we're doing a lot more inventorying, and we've changed our password standards for those particular identities. And the hope is to get a technology that allows for us to see its activities and anything that looks abnormal so we can proactively respond.
Yeah, I would say also from an inventory perspective, understanding them and removing them. Cleaning it up constantly. Don't let them sit out there too long is really essential. Put some metrics around that.
If I can add one more thing, as we get into bots, more and more bots, agentic AI, that's very concerning for me, because that inventory will change rapidly. They're going to look like humans, honestly. They're not going to be the same as a service account. They will be, I think there's some organizations that are giving their agentic AIs like employee IDs. Seriously, it's a different space.
And some can stand up some more of themselves.
Correct.
Inventory, yes, agreed. I look at this as similar to like your API environment. I think that's another like lost frontier over there. So it's just inventory, know what you have. Is there any heightened monitoring you can put around it? So if there's doing anything unusual, get that baseline. Those are some of the things. Still looking at tooling though.
So the fun part now, they're gonna give away all the fun giveaways. So thanks everybody for staying and joining us.
So, you know, you guys, I don't know if you realize this, but this group of people up here could literally be anywhere today, and they chose